So, Notion formulas are a bit broken. For example, let's look at the simple programming concept of an iterator. An iterator traditionally needs something to iterate over, which is usually a list, but in every programming language, you can just say, hey, create a list of 30 things, and then use that list to iterate over and do my action 30 times. In Notion, though, we're unable to tell the engine to create a list for us and then iterate over that list. So this limits us from being able to create a list of any arbitrary length, but we can mimic this functionality by creating our own list. The more you get into formulas, the more you realize that there are a lot of different hacks to get the result that you want in Notion. But we're not here to talk today about iterators and lists. We're here to tackle a much more complex issue. How can you filter through an entire database inside a Notion formula? Hey all, it's Jimmy, and we're here today to talk about how this crazy infrastructure change can unlock so many more possibilities for your Notion workspace. So to understand what this is, why it matters, and how you can use it in your workspace, we need to understand how information flows in Notion. In any simple database, we can use the formula property to represent the information that we have access to. So if I go ahead and open up a formula property, it kind of acts as a drag and drop for the different columns in that database. So at this point, we can treat the column names as the first piece of information that we have access to, and once we actually fill out the columns and add in the column names into the formula, we get access to a second layer of information, the values inside those cells. So if we take a look at it, we have access to the schema or the properties, and we have access to the values in our own page. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that we don't have access to the database object as a whole, nor do we have access to the other rows in the database. So now, in order to add one more layer of information that we can receive, we can add a relation property to this database. So database A can be related to database B, but even when we relate it to database B and don't actually put any line items in relationship to database B, we still have access to another schema. Any formula in database A will have access to the properties inside database A and the properties inside database B, as we can see here. So if we look at it more visually, formulas have access to themselves, so that's that self loop there, and now they have access with that relationship to the schema of database A and database B. So if you can kind of see where I'm going with this, we don't have access to the line items inside databases until we start linking things together. And this really foreshadows what this hack does. So when we want to know more than just the schema, when we want to query the actual row items, the actual information that's held within these databases, we need to start linking stuff together. So when we actually link stuff together, we get that information like the hello B text that we have from the cell, and we're able to display that inside the formula. So at this point, if we take a look at it, we have access to the schema of database A, the schema of database B, and now we have access to any of the line items that are linked to the current item from database B. So unfortunately with Notion, this is where that complexity ends. We can't really get much more information than this, especially, and this is the key thing, information about items inside database A, even though we're inside a formula property inside database A. Now, as an avid Notion user, I kind of chalk this up to maybe the Notion team can't justify the level of computation it takes to have entire databases available across workspaces in formulas all the time. I still don't know how much computation power it takes, but I do have a workaround for you guys where you're able to access that fourth layer of information, which is information about your fellow line items when you are an item in database A. So this is called the master page, and we're essentially going to link all the pages in database A to another page in database A called the master node. So this master node acts as a node that connects to every other page in the database. So as long as you have a link to the master node, you have a connection to the entire database row by row. Now, I know it's not super clean, and it isn't really something I would have considered doing in my first couple of years working with Notion, but as I've worked with it more and more, I've realized that these type of messy solutions can be easily hidden from a user in the back end and make systems run so much more smoothly. And now, as with most of my other hacks, if this is all you need to go jump into your system and make a million things happen, feel free to do so. But if you're still understanding this concept and trying to figure out how you would actually incorporate this into an empty database, please stick around because we will be building some simple systems using this concept, and they will be available as templates in the description. So we're going to finish off this video by looking at a self-auditing ledger system that looks for duplicates within your ledger and makes sure that you're able to easily delete those duplicates when they're found. I'm going to go over a lot of basics on how to implement the master page efficiently in this video, so make sure to pay attention. For all these examples, we are going to be filtering or searching through all the pages that we have access to now in some sort of way. So for this one specifically, we want to have a formula that searches through the entire database and make sure that there are no duplicate items in the ledger. So that search functionality right there, we are going to use the master page to implement that search functionality. Whenever we set up something with a master page, the first page that we're going to add in is the master page. I'm calling it a master page here. You can name it whatever you want. Second thing we're going to do is add a self relation to our self. We're going to call one end of the relation master. The other end we're going to call all pages, and we are going to add in that relationship. The second and most important thing is to add a template. This will make your life so much easier when you're dealing with this master page. All the templates in your database should have a link to the master page. So we're going to go into that master relationship and we are going to link it to the master page. That means any new expense, and then I'm also going to set this as default, sorry about that, but any new expense that you create, it's going to automatically be linked to the master page. So we can call this a sample expense, and we can have those values. So for example, say I want to get a boba or something, right? So if I say this is the boba expense, and then we add in the expense date, and we say amount spent, or we'll just say amount here. Okay, so expense date, we'll say that was today. The amount that was spent, we can say that was like $12.37. And for you, it can be the same if you name like the boba shop instead, and then you have this value. So for some people, these are duplicate expenses because you're considering the same expense for the same date. But for others, this isn't going to be the same expense. I'm also going to go ahead and hide this master in all pages because, as I mentioned earlier, this is a back-end system, so you don't need to worry about whether it's linked or not anymore because we automatically made sure that that is going to happen. So one thing I do make sure to do is that even in the back end, I want to hide this master page. So I use the master page relationship to create two views, one that doesn't have the master at all, but it has everything else, and one with only the master. So let us go ahead and create that formula where we figure out whether or not there is duplicate expenses here. So I'm going to call that an audit formula. You can even say duplicates. So the first thing we are going to do is set up our let's block. So if you are not familiar with formulas, please check out some of my other videos where I talk about the importance of this let statement. But this is essentially setting up variables. So we are going to grab all pages. So the first thing we want to check is this should work. This formula needs to work for if I'm the master or if I am one of the pages. So the first thing I'm going to check is if the master is empty. Okay, so if the master is empty, that means I am the master, right? And then if it's not empty, then I'm going to be I am just a page, right? So that's what we're going to start off with, and we're going to print that out. Okay, so let's see, I am just a page, jump to the master, I am the master. So if I am the master, I am going to just do myself.allPages. So this property is going to give me back all the pages. If I am just a page, so let's go back here, make sure that's working. This is going to give me everything. Wait, also wrap this. Okay. If I am just a page, I haven't gotten anything yet. So if I am a page, I am going to need to map that master property because all pages is going to be empty for me. So if we open up any of these, that all pages value is going to be empty, but we can get all pages through the relationship that it has with the master page. So let's do that. So here I can go in, I can be like map master, okay? So current, so map master current, let's just look at that. So that just outputs the master page. For here, it outputs everything else. We come back in here, and then what we need to do is current dot all pages. Sorry. Dot all pages. So what this is doing is it's going into the master relationship, right? So if I look inside here, it's going into the master relationship, and from that master page, it's pulling the all pages property. So all pages right there. Now we're going to, so now that's just all pages, right? I'm also going to turn on debug mode. So one thing I have noticed is that when things are in this format where it's a double array, we can't access the map property on those. So right now, if I try to map, so all pages is a list, right? So we should be able to call the map property on all pages. But if I do that and I do current, it's not going to pull any of the properties that we know that all pages has. So we know it has an amount, and we know it has this, we know it has that, right? But what I can do here is I can make sure to flatten it. So if I call the flat on this, that means it takes anything that's multiple arrays and it flattens it, right? So now if we also want to get rid of this error, we can take the flat off of here, and we can just put it on this map function right here. So that will get rid of that error. So now we definitely have a list, and it is a flattened list, so we don't see that double array situation. If we go over to master, we can see that, again, this is going to be a flattened list, so we don't need to worry about that issue. All right. So now, what do we want to do with all of these pages? So we are going to go ahead and filter all pages. So if you can see, this is what all pages looks like. It is a list of these 4 items that we're able to see on the left. So when I filter those, essentially what's going to happen is that we will have an iterator that goes through all pages. It figures out if the condition is true, and if that condition is true, it will return that value. So I'm going to check first with amount. So if any of the other pages in this list have the same amount as my current page, then they will be returned. So you can see that these top 2 have the same amount, so they are being returned for each other. And the other thing you're also noticing at the bottom here is that the 3rd item is returning itself. The 4th item is also returning itself. So instead of having it return like that, we want to make sure that our items aren't returning themselves, but otherwise this formula is working fine. So let's go ahead and fix that first issue that we see. So I'm going to do that by adding an ID property here. Okay, so once that renders, we can move it all the way to the left. And then what I'm going to do inside the formula is I'm going to make sure that the current .id property is not equal to my own ID. Okay, I can also enter this and make sure it's right under so it's easier to see. Okay. So now if we render that, we can see that the first item is returning the second item as a duplicate, and the second item is returning the first item as a duplicate. So that looks perfect for us. The next thing we also want to check is that the item has the same expense date and the same name. So if we go into here, we add in those 2 conditions. Okay. So if we add in those conditions, we can see that there will be no duplicates being returned. And this is essentially how I want this system to work for me. So if I do notice that something is a duplicate, I can go ahead and verify whether or not I got boba twice that day, or if it's legitimately a duplicate. In the case that we went to the auto shop and we got a spanner or something like that, and then later on, we saw the same expense in our credit card statement, and we named it just Auto Shop or AutoZone or something like that, right? So in the situation, these both reference the same exact thing, but we have them listed as 2 line items, which means we're considering double the expense for the same exact thing. So this right now won't be registered as a duplicate because I'm assuming that when I went back in and went through the ledger, I named it Spanner again. So In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to create a second property called potential duplicates. So I already went ahead and created that property, but it looks basically the exact same. Okay, and here we can see that if we rename the second item, it is registering as a potential duplicate. And the reason I've done this as two separate properties is once we start working with automations, we're going to use this duplicates as a source of truth, but we're going to use the potential duplicates to just alert the user in case things are named differently. Now, even though we've identified which items are duplicates of each other, we still need a way to be able to quickly delete everything at once. So we are going to create a view that can easily delete all the real duplicates. So, for example, if we're looking here, I'm going to filter this, or I'm going to sort this by ID. For the moment, we are not going to show the master page. So master is not empty. Okay, so these are all the real expenses. In this view, we can see that items 3 and items 5 are duplicates of each other. So traditionally, I would delete item 5 and leave item 3 to be because item 3 seems to be the initially created item. This view should show all the items that are duplicates, that have duplicates, but are the second item or the item with the larger ID. So let's try to create a formula that will let us do that. So what this formula is going to do is it's going to check the duplicates array, the list that we have that says what all the duplicates are. It's going to find their ID, and it's going to make sure that none of those IDs are less than my ID. So if I was created after one of the other duplicates, then I should have a potential delete marker on top of me. So what this formula will do is it'll find out if any of the other IDs are less than mine, and then it'll say, yes, there are some that are less than you, or no, there aren't any that are less than you, so you are the original. Okay, so this is going to return true, right? And we can show that this is going to be true even if we create more items like this. So if I create another one of these, this is item 7. If I get rid of the name, if I change the name, then this is also considered a duplicate item. So we are going to take this and we are going to this. If it's checked, we are going to save this. So this is how we are going to go ahead and figure out whether an item is a duplicate item, and we are going to be able to delete all of those items together at once. And we can make sure that, for example, if I say, oh no, this is the second time I had boba that day, then that will no longer be an actual duplicate. It would just have potential duplicates. This is how we would go ahead and make sure that we can easily delete those duplicates, and then we can have our general line items. Alright, so this is that setup right there. We can even hide the potential duplicates section as well. So this system at the very top functions completely without the idea that there even are duplicate finders, but then down here we're able to see that maybe there are duplicates and we're able to delete those duplicates if necessary. And last but not least, this is the most exciting feature to me, but it is only available if you're on the Plus plan or have access to automation somehow. But we are going to take newly added transactions and dynamically group them together through relations. It has a little bit of similarity to how we actually found the duplicates, but in this situation, if we add a new transaction that's also named Fancy Feast Gems, for example, we would then use automations to link this item to the other Fancy Feast gems, and then that way we can run charts and we can run different analyses on those item groups, if that makes sense. So I'm going to use this example in my own ledger to kind of demonstrate what I'm looking for. So this is something that we purchase every month through Amazon, and it is usually this price, but sometimes the price does fluctuate. So what I've done here, and I don't have a master page set up, so it is possible to do it without a master page, but what I've done is I've just done a filter for the name containing Stinky Treat, and using that name, it kind of creates a chart of all of the occurrences of that specific item. So here you can see that sometimes it's charging $15, whereas other times it is charging $14. So this kind of price analysis lets me know whether the Amazon subscribe and save actually has any effect on how much we end up paying for the item, since they do claim to have 5% and 10% discounts. So using this price over time chart, you can do that. Now, this is something I set up per template, per item, that I knew was going to be a recurring purchase. So using this system where it's dynamically decided whether items are related and dynamically put into groups, we can do this automatically. So if I randomly added a new item called Fancy Feast Gems, then those items would be automatically grouped together just based on the fact that their names were identical, and I wouldn't have to come in here and create a synced block or have this chart set up manually anytime. So let's go ahead and set that up inside the self-auditing financial system. I have cleaned it up a little bit, so let's go ahead and jump back into the settings and go inside that transactions database. So one thing you will notice here is that I have related transactions, all items, and duplicate properties, and inside those duplicate properties is where we stored anything that's necessary for the duplicates. We also have the all items and the duplicates where none of them have access to the master, but in the back end, we do have a place where we do have access to the master, which is inside this do not touch like master tab. So heading back to the related transactions, we are going to create a formula property and a relation property. The formula property is going to be potential related transactions, and the relation property is going to take that formula property and actually turn it into a relation using automations. So at the duplicate level, we were using our master page to calculate a formula that gave us back potential duplicates. But at this level, we are going to take the values that are returned by that formula and we are going to actually turn them into a relation property. So this adds another layer of complexity and another layer of usability, because with those related transactions, we can now create tabbed layouts and we can create linked database views. So the formula is actually pretty simple. We can just jump into the duplicates tab and grab that duplicates formula, and it is going to be that formula minus a couple of the conditions. So we want the IDs to be different, but we are going to go ahead and remove the constraints on the amount and the date, and we're making sure that it is items with the same name and the same category. So once that formula gets calculated, if we double check the formula values, we can see that we have 3 Fancy Feast gems for item number 12, which is perfect because we want the other 3 items in the database to show up right here. So these values inside the formula property are the ones that we are going to relate to each other. With the help of automations, we can now drag and drop whatever is returned by the formula property into the relation property. This automation is going to be triggered when any of the properties in the database are edited or a new page is added to the database. So this means that if we change the category or if we change the name of any of the line items, then this automation will get re-triggered and they will relink to the correct items. Now we're going to set a variable, and this variable is going to represent whatever is returned by the formula. Using variables inside automations can really help with debugging. This is why I'm setting a separate variable to just hold the value of what is returned by that potential related transactions formula. Finally, we can just go ahead and set that related transactions relation to this value. So if we go ahead and click the related transactions variable that we just set at the top, we will replace the related transactions relation with the value that is inside the formula. Make sure to use replace here instead of remove or add, because we want it to exactly match any removals or additions that are happening through the formula. We don't have to deal with that on our own. I also want to mention that you could possibly have issues if you have any property edited and any page added as the trigger, so I've limited to just any property edited because it will recalculate every time you change any of the properties, so it kind of covers all situations and works perfectly. Now we can go ahead and test out this functionality. I'm creating a new item called Fancy Feast Gems, and then once we go ahead and add in the other values like the date, amount, and category, it will be flagged as a potential related transaction, and then the related transactions will automatically relate to each other. I've done it one more time here with a third item called Fancy Feast Gems, and as I fill out the information, you can see that the potentially related transactions is getting updated, and so is the relationship to related transactions. Now, it is pretty boring just to see these values fill out in the back end, so what I've gone ahead and done is added in a tabbed layout inside each of these pages where you can see the other potentially related items and see the price over time because I sorted it by the date. And I've also gone ahead and used a linked database view inside the main template to show the price over time inside a chart. And with this chart, you can organize it by month, by date, by week, by year, whatever you want, just to see the price over time and automatically have that set up for you. And with that, the self-auditing financial system does come to an end. These are all the interesting features that I've implemented, and I've also used automatic months, which is another one of my concepts that I have on my channel, to go ahead and kind of calculate some roll-ups for each month and automatically link the expenses to the specific month that they're related to. So if you guys liked watching this video and you liked seeing interesting concepts in Notion, please look at my other videos. I will be posting a couple more videos using this master page concept, and those will be a little bit more complex compared to this. So I do hope you guys will be interested in using that. And the end snippet that I have for this video is actually going through Coda and show you guys how much easier this is in Coda, because they do actually have a native master page or a native access to database objects, and they have native access to all the database items regardless of what database you're in. So really quick, let me show you guys what we're missing out on in Notion. So this is my Coda workspace. I'm going to quickly jump into the back end. So here we have tasks and reminders, classes, and points. So just going inside the task and reminders database, let me go ahead and try to add a property. So here I'm going to open up a formula, and I'm going to play with this formula. So this right here is going to pull the entire class's database, and this means I can get any information from the class's database without even being related. So let me pull the same exact thing in a completely new database. So if I head back over to the backend, I'm going to create a new database. We're going to say start blank, and then I'm going to turn one of these into a formula. So this brand new database that's not linked to anything else can still reference the class's database, and it's going to reference the entire table. But in Notion, as it stands right now, it's virtually impossible to be able to go to a formula and directly search up an entire database.